include Progressive Insurance with its Name Your Price tool, a way to see coverage options based on a driver's budget. Learn more at progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Welcome into Studio 2. I'm Cherry Gregg.
And I'm Avi Wolfman-Arendt. Hello to our radio audience. Hello to our YouTube audience, our studio tubers, our spud buds, our tater collaborators. It's so nice to have you on this Wednesday. Obviously, the Eagles will be in the Super Bowl on Sunday. Lots of folks saying, go Birds, everywhere you go Birds,
everywhere
go Birds, go Birds. And if you do that on the internet, anywhere on the internet, it is likely that someone will reply with a specific GIF of the character Mac from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia saying, go Birds, go Birds, go Birds. It's just a great GIF that communicates the passion that people feel for that particular statement. And we are going to have the guy that created Mac and plays Mac on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, Rob McElhenney, on the show today as our main guest in segments 2 and 3. He's also done Welcome to Wrexham, Mythic Quest. As part of Welcome to Wrexham, he owns a Welsh soccer team, football team, with Ryan Reynolds. So there's a lot to talk about with Rob. And of course, he's a huge Eagles fan.
Huge, yeah.
So we're excited to talk to him. He's a Philly guy, South Philly native. And we know you have questions for Rob McElhenney. So if you want to get them in right now, email studio2@whyy.org or call 888-477-9499. Or if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment right there in the YouTube stream.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to our conversation and spent a lot of time watching clips of It's Sunny. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It's funny show.
Yeah, you liked it.
Yeah, I really did. It was really, really funny. And I didn't realize it had been on for so long.
Yeah, it's a record
Like, how did
setting.
I miss it? I'd heard of it a few years ago, but I'm just like, how did I not know it was on like
well, we might
so
talk
many years
about
ago?
that, but it had sort of a slow build. It just grew this cult following. The early seasons did not rate particularly well, but it was always critically acclaimed, and it just sort of grew and grew and grew over time. It has a fascinating arc just as a show, not the narrative arc of the show itself, but just the arc of the show's success is unusual. When, it's at a business where people often, they rip the cord, right, when a show doesn't hit immediately.
But they got the chance to grow.
Yeah. So again, 888-477-9499. You can email studio2@whyy.org, and we'll talk to Rob after a trio of local news stories. And we'll start with you, Cherry. You've got story number 1.
Yeah, you've probably heard about the reports that President Donald Trump has proposed that the U.S. occupy Gaza. Well, we have some local reaction from Pennsylvania's U.S. Senator John Fetterman. He has called the proposal, quote, provocative, and he has said that it's part of the conversation, and he did not dismiss that idea. Now, the news about the comments were posted on X originally by Jewish insider reporter Emily Jacobs. She posted that he said of Palestinians that, quote, they allowed October 7th to occur. Now Gaza has to be rebuilt. Where are the people going to live? Where are they going to go? So it's part of the conversation with where they are now. Now, all of this came in response to the press conference that President Trump had, where he said that the U.S. would take over the Gaza Strip, possibly with the help of American troops, that they would level all the destroyed buildings and do some economic development and, quote, do something different. Now, of course, a number of leaders from countries like Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Egypt staunchly oppose this idea. Democrats have come out against it. But we've talked about Senator Fetterman on the show before. He's broken with his party on a number of issues, especially with progressives when we talk about the war in Gaza.
Yeah. I would be curious if he was on the show. And by the way, we've invited him to be on the show many times. I would definitely question the use of the word provocative. I would ask him how this is different than his former positions that the U.S. should not be on the ground in Syria, that we should get out of Afghanistan. Why is this a different situation? Because he's had more of an isolationist bent on many, many other issues. And then also, what he didn't respond to. He called it provocative, but didn't respond to the tone of it, which is not just the displacement of 2 million
yeah,
people.
removable.
But
Yeah.
the idea that it's a real estate venture and that the U.S. would turn it into the Riviera of the Middle East.
That
I
part,
mean,
yeah.
zero response to that. Zero response to that.
Yeah.
To removing all of those people from their homeland and turning it into a resort. Just no response to that. That's what I would ask Senator Fetterman if he would ever come on the show.
Yeah.
And he has never done that.
Yeah. By the way, Democrats have gone so far as to call this proposal a proposal for, quote, ethnic cleansing. And by the way, Fetterman has been the lone sitting Democrat, well, the first sitting Democratic senator who visited President Trump at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. He did that. He talked about it on The View. He also was the lone Democrat to vote to confirm Pam Bondi for Attorney General. So he's broken with the party on numerous occasions, has expressed a willingness to work with President Trump, but he has broken with the president on issues like January 6th rioters getting that pardon. So
Offer stands, Senator. Story number 2. Speaking of criminal justice, Department of Justice, border and law enforcement, Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, has threatened to prosecute Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey for allegedly harboring an undocumented immigrant based on offhand remarks that Murphy made on Saturday in front of an audience at Montclair State University. First, I want to play the clip. This is what Murphy said.
I don't want to get into too much detail, but there's someone in our broader universe whose immigration status is not yet at the point that they are trying to get it to. And we said, you know what, let's have her live at our house above our garage. And good luck to the feds coming in to try to get her.
Okay, so it certainly sounds like what he's saying there is that there's someone living on his property who, if not undocumented, doesn't have
has questionable status.
Doesn't have full legal status. So Homan responded saying that they would prosecute him if that was the case. He's walked it back and said basically it was a hypothetical, that there is no person, which doesn't quite line up with how the tense that he used in that statement, but that's where it is now. And so it made huge ripples, obviously, because there seemed to be the possibility that Murphy was challenging them to arrest someone who was living with him. Yeah.
And it was interesting because Elon Musk posted on X, wow, and that video clip got 14 million views. So it went viral. And, you know, there have been a lot of protests with activists trying to figure out how to resist the Trump administration's immigration policies. Yeah. And so, you know, it could have been something that the administration wanted to make clear. This is illegal if you do this.
But also on the flip side of this, like, I am curious whether it's Murphy or some other high profile person, will there be sort of this civil disobedience
where
figure
people are taking
who says, you know, arrest me. Go through me if you want to get to X, Y, and Z, or you want to, whether it's immigration or any other policy that the Trump administration is pursuing, because that has been a tactic in the past. And I thought that's what he was sort of aiming toward.
But he walked it back.
He walked it back.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, but it would be interesting to see if that is a tactic that someone else picks up on at some point, because it's a way to draw a lot of attention to the issue and to the humanity that's at the core of it.
Yeah, and at this point, no one has done that. So we're waiting to see what the resistance is going to look like. By the way, there's some resistance brewing in a very Philly way.
Okay. To what?
To
How?
The Kansas City Chiefs.
Sure, yes.
Okay. If you've been around the city recently, you may have noticed a very Philly thing going on. There are posters with a smiling photo of Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs.
I know him.
But the poster reads, Travis Kelce sucks.
Okay.
And at the bottom, in parentheses, it says, let's beat him up. And there's actually a date for an alleged event, and it's dated this Saturday, February 8th at 1 p.m. in Rittenhouse Square, of all places. The event is hosted by Crossing Broad. You have to RSVP. I did it. I RSVP.
Are you
gave my
gonna
real.
go?
Gave my real. I didn't give my real name. So
What
it's
is
supposed
it?
to be this event.
But what's the event?
It's supposed to be a gathering where they're supposed. I don't know if they're going to beat people up or what, but I know dozens of people. I counted it. I stopped counting once I hit 40. I was like, it's a lot of people. Dozens of people have signed up, and you had to give your real number in order to get access. So yeah.
So it's an event.
Yes.
It's at a time.
In
It
Rittenhouse
has a
Square.
place. The event is Travis Kelce sucks.
Yes.
In parentheses, let's beat him up.
Let's beat them up.
But obviously Travis Kelce's not going to
No,
be there.
of
So
course
what
not.
is the event?
I have no idea.
Are you
what
really
it is.
going to go?
I'm not going. I just wanted. I'm doing this for research purposes, man. You know that. You know about my
I thought
research.
you were going to report back on Tuesday.
You know what? I might have to go like stand across the street
What are you
at the
doing on
bookstore and look
Saturday?
over there. So
At the bookstore. You're going to be in the Barnes and Noble peeking over your book. Yeah.
and looking there. But if they were really going to beat them up, I don't think it would happen because we have too many Swifties here.
What do you mean? It's not going to happen because
I
he's
know.
not
I
going to
know.
be here.
We're doing hypotheticals.
Okay, in a hypothetical world where he's not in New Orleans but is in Rittenhouse Square, you think the Swifties would protect him?
Yes, they
would. They
would.
would be his bodyguards.
Yes, they would.
Wow. Okay. So, speaking of fantasy.
Oh yes.
Mythic Quest, that's a show about
Yeah.
video games and fantasy on some level. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia has a fantastical element to it. And we're going to talk with Philly native Rob McElhenney on the other side of this break. If you've got questions for Rob, email studio2@whyy.org or leave a comment in the YouTube stream. We'll be right back.
Supporting WHYY, Rachel Riley, a real estate agent with Elfont Wissahickon Realtors. She's committed to being an advisor to her clients on building wealth, stability, and happiness through buying and selling homes. RachelRileyRealEstate.com.
On the next Fresh Air, one of Pete Hegseth's first actions as defense secretary was to declare the end of the DEI era. A serious problem the military is facing, though, is a severe shortage of recruits. We'll talk about why, how the military is attempting to reverse the trend, and how vulnerable to attack we've become. With Dexter Filkins of The New Yorker. Join us.
This afternoon at 3 and again tonight at 7 on WHYY.
Supporting WHYY, Comcast Business. Committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Restrictions apply. Learn more at ComcastBusiness.com. Comcast Business, powering possibilities.
Traveling is fun, inspiring, and in many cases, life-changing. But for the people who live in these destinations, it's not always for the better. This is Peak Travel, a podcast from WHYY, and we're back with our second season. I'm your host, Tariram Zazewa. We're traveling the world, tailgating the Super Bowl in New Orleans, touring ancient caves in Petra, and summiting Himalayan peaks in Bhutan. All to figure out how travel shapes communities and hotspots around the world, and how we can do it better. Find us wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Studio 2. I'm Cherry Gregg.
And I'm Avi Wolfman-Arent. You know, television sitcoms come and go. Lots of them. The average lifespan, like 3 to 5 seasons, if you're lucky. Well, when South Philly native Rob McElhenney pitched the idea for It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, he could not have imagined, I would imagine, that it would be entering its 17th season this summer. The dark, irreverent comedy about a gang of friends set in South Philly dive bar Patty's Pub has had remarkable staying power and rightly earned a cult following.
And McElhenney's knack for creating hit shows has continued. While working on It's Always Sunny, McElhenney also launched 2 other series. Mythic Quest on AppleTV Plus just rolled out season 4, and Welcome to Wrexham, a documentary series about managing the Welsh football team he bought with friend Ryan Reynolds during the pandemic.
So this hour, we're very lucky. We get to talk to Rob about his shows, about owning a soccer team, growing up in Philly. He's also a big Eagles fan, so we will certainly get his take on the big game. And we've got your questions and comments already coming in. Kyle Green on YouTube says, can you ask Rob if he's played soccer? One person, K Hag, asks, would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses? So we're going to have lots of questions for Rob this hour. Mike emails Rob as a worldwide figure in many diverse platforms. What's your current perception of Philly, and does its true lifestyle live up to the stereotype? So we'll get to those and many more questions this hour. Let's give out the number and the email address.
Yes, please send us in your questions. You can call us at 888-477-9499. You can also email studio2@whyy.org. And if you're watching on WHYY's YouTube channel, you can drop your comments or questions in the live chat. And if you love the show, like if you've been a long fan, I'd love to hear one of your favorite episodes. Just give us some, your memories of watching Rob on television.
And I will confess, although I like It's Always Sunny, my favorite thing that he's done is Welcome to Wrexham, this docu-series about owning.
Because you love sports. You're like a lover
I love
of
sports. I love documentary. And I think it's one of those things where if you just sort of read the description of it, okay, they buy a Welsh soccer team. It seems a little wacky. Maybe it's funny. And it is funny. It's so heartfelt. And it's so layered because it's a documentary about the club,
about the people,
the players, the manager. It's about the town. It's about the fans. And in many ways, it's also about celebrity and fame itself. So speaking of celebrity, we've got our own Rob McElhenney here, native of South Philadelphia. Rob,
Pensport.
Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Cherry and Avi. And I've noticed that you said my last name like 4 or 5 different times during the intro. And I just want to say how much I appreciate the courage that it takes to
How close
I practiced.
Be honest.
I could tell, and you pronounced it perfectly each time. And I just wanted to shout that out and say thank you.
I will say I used as a reference video the birthday gift that Ryan Reynolds gave you, which was like a music number that told people how to pronounce your name. And
yes,
that was
That's
the
love.
tool
That's
that helped
love.
me.
It truly, and I'm always on record that I know it is a ridiculously long name, and it's tricky with if you pronounce the AC or C or how it goes. So I never assume that people are going to get it right. And so when people do, they do the research before watching that video. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And by the way, so my name's Avi Wolfman Arendt, so I am very sensitive to this particular issue, name pronunciation. Yes. So we do try our
and
best
I get
with
called
that.
Sherry a lot, even though it's Cherry, and you said my name correct. So there you go.
So now that we've got the niceties out of the way, I want to talk about your childhood a little bit. And we were doing prep for this, and I was curious about the first time that you appeared in the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I assumed it would be with It's Always Sunny. But I found something from 1987, and I think maybe you know what's coming here. So I want to put it up on the screen.
I know exactly what's coming.
Okay,
wow.
So here we go. This is 1987. It's a story about the boys' choir, the Philadelphia Boys Choir, and it's not about you, but it's a picture of you, Robert. It says Robert McElhenney,
full name,
and it's a picture of you in the Philadelphia Boys Choir sticking your tongue out with great comedic timing. So first of all, you remember this being in the paper when I guess you were about 10 years old.
Of course. I mean, this was at a time when being in the newspaper, I mean, that was global celebrity as far as I was concerned. And I was blown away. I had no idea that it was going to happen. But then, of course, if you did notice, I'm actually I'm licking my thumb to get a grip so that I could turn the page so that I could continue to sing. And for whatever reason, they chose that one to put into the newspaper. So all of my friends and family and anybody that saw it asked me why I was sticking my tongue out at the photographer, which I was not doing. So that was my welcome to the world of media.
And by the way, so you did boys choir as a kid. Were you always a theater music kid? Was that your entree into the world of the arts?
No, it actually wasn't. The truth of the matter is I was a terrible athlete. I tried everything. I tried basketball, baseball, football, and everything. And I was so terrible at everything, and I needed an extracurricular activity. And so for whatever reason, my music teacher in school said, "You have a pretty high voice." And honestly, this is even funnier. I didn't go through puberty until like way later in life. And so I was able to sing at a high soprano level and still have the maturity of like a 12 or 13-year-old. So I didn't last too long in the Philadelphia Boys Choir because eventually they realized I couldn't sing. It was just that my voice was really high. But then from there, I went to an all-boys Catholic school. Yeah. And because I was so terrible at all of the sports and I didn't have anything to do after school, they made an announcement one day that they were looking for boys to play some of the male characters in some of the girls' schools, Mary and Mercy, Notre Dame Academy. And so I thought, well, I like my odds there if I go and spend my afternoons with the girls, and that's how I got into doing plays.
I love that. I read that you said that you were not the funny person in your friend group growing up. when did you realize that you had a knack for being funny?
I still don't necessarily know that that's true. A text chain about the Super Bowl coming up this weekend with 12, 13 guys that I went to high school with who are still my best friends. And I'm not even the fourth funniest person on that text chain. Um, I think what I've been fortunate enough to do is to find some of the funniest people on the planet and get my hooks into them and hold on for dear life and just try to keep up with them. And I truly believe that that's the case. I have a knack for finding great partners.
I want to ask a little bit more about South Philly. Growing up in South Philly, you're from Dickinson and Moyamensing, which I think most people would call Pennsport, although these days there's this Dickinson Narrows name that pops around in the real estate community. But when you were growing up in South Philly, did you feel, you said you were bad at sports. Did you feel like that was sort of what was the expected outlet for you, like the thing that you were supposed to excel at? Or why were you interested in being an athlete first and you had to fail at that?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I don't know if it was a chicken or the egg thing, if it was an expectation for boys at the time. I didn't feel necessarily pressure from my parents or my peers. It was just sort of something at the time in the earlier mid 80s that's what boys do. And I still had an affinity for it. I had interest, but like I said, because I was so terrible, I had to find another outlet. And I did find that once I got into the arts, there was actually a fairly robust program at a lot of these schools, and yet I never really thought of it as a profession.
Yeah.
I would watch television at night or watch movies, and I would think that California or Hollywood was a mystical land off, maybe even on another planet where they made these things, but that it didn't really exist. So it never really seemed to me as like a long-term plan. It was just something that I thought was fun. And I didn't even necessarily would say that I excelled. I just, I was able to participate like in a way that I was unable to in sports.
Wow.
And then so you go to St. Joe's Prep, and then I read that you did go to Temple kind of for a little bit, and then you left. So first of all, how old were you when you left school, and what did you do at that point? Was it straight into the acting writing dream, or was there like a period in between where you're trying to figure it out?
Yeah, I noticed, obviously I went to a prep school, and so the expectation was to go to college, and I just was a really, really terrible student. I was in a very strange position, and I can get into those reasons later that I literally just found out within the last few years. But I had these learning differences, and they were not identified, and so I was not a really great student, and it wasn't lining up with how I was able to excel in other areas. And so I had a ton of support, but I just couldn't get the grades. I didn't have the SATs. And yet, fortunately, Temple said, "Hey, we'll let you in. We'll let you come here, and we'll see how you do." And again, even with the support that I had, it was really, really difficult for me. And so I wound up dropping out within the first semester, and not because I wanted to give up, but because I also noticed that most of my friends who were freshmen at schools all over the country were doing a lot of drinking and partying and socializing, which was great, but it didn't seem like there was a lot of academics happening, and it didn't seem like there was a lot of, and I recognize that going to college is also a part, of growing up and socializing, but I saw a lot of student debt. And I thought, well, what if I just take a year off and kind of travel around the country to other schools and see if maybe some of those schools click with me, and maybe I can find a school or an academic program that fits with the way that I process information. And unfortunately, I couldn't. But what I did find was an acting school in New York City. So I left Philadelphia when I was 18, and I moved to New York, and I started at the Lee Strasberg Institute.
Wow. And I read that you started your acting career and things didn't always go the exact way you wanted it to go, but someone suggested that you start writing. What was that transition like? And clearly you're really good at it, but sort of how did you get into that writing space, that creative space?
Well, that's exactly what happened. I was auditioning. This was another advantage of hitting puberty late. I looked really, really young, but I was 18 years old, and I looked like I was 14. And that gives you such an advantage in the entertainment industry, at least at the time, because you were an adult, so you could work adult hours, but you looked like you were a little kid, so you could play little kids. And the only jobs I were getting were commercials, but commercials paid fairly well. So I was sort of waiting for the auditions, and then for a 12 or 13-year-old when I was 18,
Wow.
in between most of the time waiting tables or working in a bar. Ironically, I was able to work in a bar at 18 and 19 and 20, but not participate in all the festivities that happen at a bar. So I was literally living in New York and working from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. and then getting up and going on auditions. And every once in a while, you'd get a commercial, and that would pay for a few months of to subsidize your life. But otherwise, you just had to do what you had to do, and work in the hospitality field, which is what I did. And I was doing this for a few years, and noticing that as I grew older, that I wasn't getting a lot of the commercial gigs that I was getting when I was younger, because I didn't look so young anymore. So the talent pool grew, and I wasn't working. And I went through a full year and a half where I did not get one acting job. And I realized that if this was going to work, I couldn't rely on somebody else casting me. I was going to have to write something for myself. And so that's what I did.
And you alluded to this earlier, that school was not your thing, that you had some learning struggles. First of all, you said you might go into that later, and I'm curious about what you discovered over the last few years. But also, did that impact your ability to sort of get into the industry as a writer and creator, or did you find ways to work through that?
Yeah, I think, again, this is retrospectively. Now I look back on it, and it seems and feels like such a blessing, but it did not feel like it at the time. But anybody that is struggling with any kind of neurodivergency recognizes that what we have to do is look at the world differently. So we're presented with problems, and to solve those problems, sometimes you have to think outside the box, because the tool set that you've been given doesn't allow for you to solve them in traditional ways. So again, this is retrospectively looking back at it, I realized, wow, what that did for me was give me an opportunity and a skill set to come at problems from a different perspective. And that's all storytelling is just looking at an empty whiteboard and trying to fill it. So what it also does is it gives you a certain level of adversity that you have to overcome. And again, doesn't feel good in the moment. But as you get into the arts, you realize that some of the greatest artists of all time are struggling with all sorts of different things. So it was the confluence of the struggle with also a different way of looking at the world because of the neurodivergence that allowed me to create things that other people might might look at differently, which is how we came up with Sunny.
And so let's talk about the show a little bit. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I took a look at an episode or two from the first season and compared it to like the more recent seasons. And what I found so interesting is that you guys were willing to take on super tough, dark issues, from race to child sex, priest abuse. I mean, in the first season, okay? And you were able to deal with it with a level of sensitivity, but then also throw some funny in there. I want to talk about your chutzpah a little bit. As such a young writer, because you were in your 20s when the show was created, like, where did you find that kind of courage to go there, to touch on those topics, but then to put humor in?
Well, we always wanted to make sure that the show was satire, and we knew that the audience, that there would be a certain amount of people that saw it and wrote it off very early on as just base or crude or pushing the boundaries of good taste, and all of those things may be true, but if we were trying to do it in service of a broader satirical look at culture and pushing things through the prism of the most terrible people you could possibly imagine, that we could explore all sorts of different taboo subjects out in the world. And the thing that really jumped out at me was I remember getting an audition for something. It was a network television show, and they had to do a rewrite on it because the original draft of this was a drama. The original draft of the script said the word abortion in it. They were talking about someone that had an abortion, and they did a rewrite because they had to take the word abortion out. And I said, wait, why did they take the word abortion out? And they said, well, we can't really say that on TV. And I thought, this was not a comedy, by the way. This was a drama. It was a medical drama. And I thought, well, wait a second. Abortion happens to be then at the time and now, of course, a huge social issue that we're all talking about all the time and trying to figure out. It's an issue of healthcare. It's an issue of that all of us are struggling with and talking about, and we're not even allowed to say the word on television. Didn't make any sense to me. I think that the only way that you can solve problems is by speaking to each other, and the only way that you can break the ice of difficult subjects sometimes is through humor. So we thought the fusion of those two things would allow us to get into taboo subjects and to start conversations.
I wonder, did being on FX give you some freedom in a way to go there in ways that you wouldn't have been able to do on, like, say, network television?
Yeah, that was the other thing too. So we had the ability, the unlock of being able to do and say things that you weren't able to on network television. And what that allowed us to do is sort of stretch the idea of what a satirical comedy could be. And in fact, they encouraged us to push the boundaries because they were a fledgling network and they were trying to get people to pay attention. And sometimes, as we all know, cut to 20 years later, the clickbait type subjects that will get people's attention. We weren't thinking about that at the time. We were just thinking about, well, what are the things you can't do on network television? And interestingly enough, a huge influence of mine was Friends. I loved the show Friends. And people hear that and they say, well, it doesn't seem like an influence. But to me, that was a show where it was about these people who, it literally says in the opening title sequence, I'll be there for you. And I love that idea. And I love the idea of friends that will always be there for each other. But then pushing it through the prism of something I'd never seen before, what if we made a show where there were a group of people who were not friends, but they were stuck together because no one else would be friends with them, and they would never be there for each other, and they would undermine each other constantly to get what they want. If we could somehow make that funny, it would be original, and it would be something that isn't being done on television at the time. And so that's what we were going for.
Wow. Bizarro Friends. I had never thought of it that way, but that's interesting. And by setting the show in Philadelphia, do you think it was easier to build that vehicle into these spaces of society that people didn't want to talk about? Was that part of the calculus for setting it in Philly? And also generally, at what point did you decide to set it in Philly? Because my understanding is when you shot sort of the what became not the pilot, but the idea, you were running around LA with a camcorder. So was it always going to be in Philly, or was that a later decision?
Can I just say again, I really, really appreciate this, that you guys have done so much research and you're asking questions and like, I'm super impressed and I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Well, we appreciate you being here for sure.
It's a great show. Yes, originally it was shot it took place in Los Angeles because that's where we were living. And we just shot it on camcorders, and I just wanted to make it about terrible people, and terrible people can live anywhere. It turns out there's lots of terrible people in Los Angeles. But the thing that I really wanted to stress, and we start every episode the same way with a title card that says the time of day, 1:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, Philadelphia, PA. And the reason that we do that is because we want to suggest that this could happen at any point of the day. That this was like their normal lives. This was the normal lives of these sociopaths, and so the only thing that mattered. Originally, we had them as actors because we were actors, and because we thought people would buy that these actors had their free time during the day, and that they were so narcissistic that they would just undermine each other to get what they wanted. But then there was a glut of shows that were taking place in Los Angeles at the time. And so the network came to us and said, would you consider putting it somewhere else? And I said, we can literally put this anywhere, because you can find these kinds of people in any major city. The city that I know better than I know Los Angeles is the city of Philadelphia. So as long as it doesn't feel like an affront to the city of Philadelphia.
You could have been the villain. You could have been the villain.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. It wasn't saying anything specific about the people of Philadelphia, that they could be anywhere,
right,
lurking in the shadows, that would work. So that's why we landed on Philly.
I love that. And, we're about to take a break, but you're going to stick with us to the other side of that break. So I want to encourage people to call in. What questions do you have?
We have a lot of these to get to.
Yeah, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia actor and Philadelphia native Rob McElhenney. The number is 888-477-9499. You can email studio2@whyy.org. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, be sure to drop your comments or questions in the chat, and we'll be right back on the other side of this break.
There are 6 basic emotions: sadness, happiness, fear, anger, surprise, and disgust. Just 6, and yet it's easy to get overwhelmed by them. I'm Marty Moss-Coane, and Friday on The Connection, I'll talk with psychologist Ethan Cross, head of the Emotion and Self-Control Lab at the University of Michigan. He's got a new book, Shift, Managing Your Emotions So They Don't Manage You. That's Friday at noon on WHYY and wherever you get your podcasts.
Supporting WHYY, The Crossing. Philadelphia's 4-time Grammy-winning choir presents the world premiere of Sebastian Currier's Mysterium, in which the vastness of the universe converges with the intimacy of our lives in music of wonder and awe. Conductor Donald Nally and the internationally touring choir bring another world premiere to their home in the acoustic of the Presbyterian Church of Chestnut Hill, Friday, February 7th at 7 p.m. Tickets at crossingchoir.org.
I'm Peter O'Dowd. Figure skating icon Tenley Albright knew some of the people who died in last week's crash over the Potomac River. It brought back memories of another tragedy decades ago.
All of us who knew the skaters, who were thinking of the 1961 crash as well, each of us was feeling the same thing.
Next time on Here and Now.
Weekdays at 1 on WHYY.
And welcome back, everybody, to Studio 2. I'm Avi Wolfman-Arent.
And I'm Cherry Gregg, and we are talking with the actor, screenwriter, show creator, and Philadelphia native, Rob McElhenney, and taking your questions about It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, his Apple TV Plus sitcom, Mythic Quest, as well as about his soccer team, Wrexham AFC.
If you've got questions for Rob, give us a call, 888-477-9499. You can email studio2@whyy.org or leave a comment right there in the WHYY YouTube channel live stream.
And so, Rob, I wanted to kind of ask you another It's Always Sunny question, because I read that there had been some overlap about your real life and the show, other than it just being set in Philadelphia. Your childhood home was featured on the show, and there are some other connections. How much overlap was it with your real life, who you are in Mac? Like, just give us some of the, lay it on top of each other. Tell us what the overlap was.
The Venn diagram.
Yeah.
Well, I want to stress that any similarities between myself or any of the actors and their characters are so vast. I mean, so vast in so many ways. And yet, I mean, we could not be, I'd like to believe, we could not be any more different from those people. However, what we thought would be interesting is you just take the worst aspects of our personalities and we just blow them up. So it's like we're just these walking ids that are essentially cartoon characters that are vessels for this satire. So I'd like to believe that I'm nothing like Mac, and that Dennis is nothing like Dennis and Charlie's nothing like Charlie, but we just leaned into all of the things that, whether they're our insecurities or the things that we thought were most extreme. But as far as the locations, yes. In fact, that house that I grew up in South Philly served as my house that I grew up in the television show. And then we also went back and revisited it, and you see the inside of it in the first episode of Welcome to Wrexham. And it's always a fascinating thing to go back to the place where you grew up, because it's obviously a completely different experience.
It's an interesting one in that case too, because in that I really love Welcome to Wrexham, and in that visit back to your home, you see that the home really hasn't changed. But what's interesting, I think, is that I feel like the neighborhood has changed a lot. I mean, I live pretty close to there, and it's not uncommon to see houses going for $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. I'm just curious about your impressions of that, and if you've been back to the neighborhood in a while, and how it strikes you.
Yes, I can say this, that I did not learn how to ride a bicycle till I was 16 or 17, and people can't believe that. And the reason that I didn't was because we weren't really allowed to go more than 2 or 3 blocks in any direction. It was a tough neighborhood. And specifically, there was a park right up the street that was definitely not a place that anybody wanted to go to.
Talk about Dickinson Square?
Exactly. And what's wild now is you go there and it's absolutely stunning. It's gorgeous.
There's a farmer's market on the weekends.
Yeah.
That is so stunning. It's hard to believe. I had to see it for myself. So we took the cameras there and we went, and it's absolutely beautiful. So what they've done with that particular area of the city, they should be so proud of it. It is what an incredible economic and cultural turnaround in that particular area.
Yeah. And I have to ask you about body transformations, because you did a lot in Sunny. You were Fat Mac, and then you had Six Pack Mac. And I mean, I know what it takes to peel off
there it is.
the layers of fat to get to the abs. And I am so impressed. I want to ask you the question, what was the toughest part? Was it mental or was it physical when you transform your body in such a way?
Well, yes, as you know, if this is something that you're wrestling with, which in some cases most adults are, even some children are as well, we realize that it is a lifestyle choice and a lifestyle struggle. It's not just a quick fix. It is something that you have to stay consistent with in both extremes. To put on 60 pounds in 4 months, I had to drink ice cream with weight gainer in it for every meal. And it was the first 20 pounds was actually fun and delicious. The next 20 pounds was a struggle, and the final 20 pounds was straight up dangerous to my liver and kidneys. You
didn't feel too good. Yeah.
I did not feel too good. And then to get it off, I simply just reduced my caloric intake significantly and then started eating healthy again, and was able to take the first 20 pounds off rather easily. But then it became a bit of a struggle, and also because I was getting older, to get into really, really good shape. The photo that you just had up is preposterous. And that is not a lifestyle that is in any way conducive to being a functioning human on the planet who has a job and children. And it's also just, and I think it is a part of like the responsibility of people who present themselves like that in television shows, movies, magazines, or whatever, to recognize and to say publicly that that is a ridiculous thing to try to maintain. I had so much support. I had someone that was cooking my meals. I had a trainer that was being paid for. I had access to a gym. I had full-time support to do that. And then there's also like movie magic tricks to enhance it. So, I think sometimes people see those kinds of images in movies and TV shows, and they think, oh, well, that's what I want to look like. And I'm just telling you, it's not impossible, but quit your job now. And if you've got kids, get rid of them. If you've got other hobbies and interests, forget it, because that's a full-time gig. But finding that balance between A and B, I think, is a really happy place to be. It's healthy and it's maintainable.
Did you take your shirt off as much as possible to get the biggest bang for the buck after doing all that work?
Interestingly enough, I did that more for the former, just because I like to see the reactions of people. I wouldn't tell them either. I wouldn't tell them that I was doing it for a role. I would just I'm just letting myself go. And I was just noticing people just being very polite, but also like constantly looking down and wondering what was happening to me, to the point where it would even make Charlie uncomfortable, and Charlie would start telling people he's doing this for a role, and I was like, Charlie, you don't have to apologize for me.
Don't give away the bit, man.
Yeah, don't give away the bit.
So we are running short on time, and I'm going to read a few of these listener questions in, and maybe you could just take one of them, the one that strikes you. I got to ask about Wrexham. That's my favorite project you've done. So Alexander Goldsmith wants to know, what's your favorite footy scran, aka UK football stadium food? And then Kyle wants to ask if you've ever actually played soccer. So take one of those for our Wrexham question.
Well, the fish and chips is always a good,
That's good.
is always a good go-to. So I would go with that, and then I would say no. I tried to play. First of all, I have to call it football, so I know that that's going to be confusing. But if I even get caught publicly calling it soccer, then
you're in trouble.
Trust me, I'll feel it on the other end of the pond. I tried, but like I said, I was so terrible that I got cut from every team that I ever tried for.
I want to ask you about one question I really wanted to ask you about Welcome to Wrexham is, so you say in the very beginning, like, if this goes wrong, you and Ryan Reynolds, who bought this team in Wales, could end up being the villains. It doesn't go wrong. I'll just spoil that. You guys do a great job with the club. But then you start to see how the people in the other towns who have these other, struggling soccer clubs view you guys, and you get little glimpses into that. And I wonder if you ever feel like you're the villains to them, because you come in from LA with the money and the fame, and you're doing to this town what they desperately want for their town.
We had to anticipate that because that's just the nature of sport. It is both community building and then also tribal, of course, right? And you find, especially with some of these towns and these clubs that have been around for hundreds of years. I mean, Wrexham was founded in 1864, and the ground that we play on is a place called the Kairas, which means race course, and it was opened originally in 1802 when Thomas Jefferson was the president of the United States. Hard to fathom the amount of time that has passed, and the rivalries that you find are with towns only 2 miles away, 5 miles away, 15 miles away, and they're bitter rivals when it comes to sport. And as we find, with sports anywhere, that I hate the Dallas Cowboys. Like, I truly hate them with all of my heart, and yet I've got so many Cowboy fans because I can compartmentalize friends. I've got friends who are massive Cowboys fans because it's just, for those 3 hours, it's fun to forget about our friendship and just be rivals. But you have to eventually check that at the door because it's just another human being who happens to care about a different football team. And at the end of the day, that's not what's important. What's important is the community surrounding it. So we know that we're going to get that kind of hate from time to time, but we pay it no mind.
Real quick, Max wants to know, is Wrexham ever going to play a friendly against the Philadelphia Union? I think you've played Philly Union too, so I don't know if that, now that the team has advanced further, whether they would ever play against the Union.
We have. When we started, we were originally, the quality of the players was in the 5th or 6th division. So we were playing the Philly Union too, but we are now in a position where we could maybe compete with their first string club. So look, I'm always looking for an excuse to come back to Philly. So that'd be great.
All right, let's get that on the calendar. And we do need to ask about Mythic Quest as well, which is entering its 4th season. And I'm curious if the way that show is shot, it's not that lo-fi style of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Do you feel like you, as an actor, then you act differently because of that? And we should tell folks it's about this video game company with some complex office dynamics, I guess you would say. So do you feel like as an actor that's you sort of channel something different when you know the show is going to be really shot so differently?
For sure. It's just a very different show in tone. Sunny, as aforementioned, is essentially a live action cartoon where satirizing. We're satirizing the entirety of Western culture, in some ways, global culture. But with Mythic Quest, it's not satire. We wanted to some of the situations and jokes may be satirical, but ultimately we wanted to present a world that felt very real. And I think actually one of our biggest liabilities turned out to be the fact that we pushed very hard in the beginning to talk about the video games. But the truth is, it's not about video games in the same way that The Office was not about paper. It's about a workplace, and it's about difficult people who are working in service of something that they believe is beneficial to the world, this particular video game. And they each bring their own gifts, their strengths, and their challenges to the workplace, and they have to figure out how to navigate those things. So as an actor, I play my character as a real human being. Whereas in Sonny, he's not really a person. He's a composite of the worst people on planet Earth.
By the way, you play Ian Grimm, these, quote, self-absorbed co-head video game creator of, and you're head of this video game design company, and you're working with company partner Poppy Lee. We want to play a quick clip of this
I have an idea for our next expansion. I want to build MQ's version of heaven. We can call it Elysium, but the only way that the player can access the new map is by dying valiantly in the game.
You want me to code courage into the game?
Yes.
That is a highly ambitious, almost delusional idea that may be impossible to execute.
Yes.
I love it.
Yes, yes.
All right, Elysium. Speaking of Elysium, we have 2 minutes left, and we hope to reach the version of fan heaven on Sunday, with the Eagles winning the Super Bowl. I have just a few rapid-fire Birds questions for you. Are you ready?
Okay. Yes.
1, do you have a game day superstition?
No.
All right. Random Eagles player from the past, a non-star who you just loved.
Keith Byers.
Oh.
Favorite color or style of Eagles jersey?
Kelly Green, not even close.
One person, could be a celebrity or not, who you really want to watch a Birds game with.
Randall Cunningham.
Yeah, I would watch. Definitely watch game. And do you think, I don't know if this has been in the show Bible, does Mac have a favorite Eagles player, or who do you think his favorite player would be?
So at one point it is revealed for comedic reasons that Mac's favorite player is actually Tony Romo, and that he is a Cowboys fan. But then he rescinds that later and says it was all a big lie. But it's always a question, and he's always questioned on the show as to where his loyalties really lie.
Because then Mac does take the whole group to Minnesota for the Super Bowl. So there is some gray area there.
Well, go Birds.
Go Birds. They say go Birds a lot.
And I guess I should ask you as we get out of here on this, are you going to the game? Because I know you went to the game in Minnesota. And do you have a prediction for how it's all going to play out on Sunday?
Oh, wow. Yes, I'm definitely going to the game. And I would like to believe it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think we're going to be able to find a way to contain Mahomes. Can't stop him, but you can slow him down. And I think we win by 4.
Ooh, take it to the bank.
Bye.
And I think it's going to be in the 30s. Like it'll be like 31 to 27 or 38, 34, something like that.
I like 2 options there. So you kind of, you can be right in a couple of ways. Thank you so much. That is Rob McElhenney, star of so many projects. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Yes. Welcome to Wrexham, Mythic Quest. Really appreciate the time. And obviously, go Birds.
Go Birds.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Rob. It was a pleasure, man.
Yes. And by the way, if you love us talking about Eagles, Studio 2 has a Super Bowl special on Friday from 1 to 3 right here on WHYY 90.9 FM. Hopefully you'll check us out on Friday.
Debbie Builder, Paige Murray Besser, Andreas Copes, producers, Mike Schiffler, visual producer, Adam Stanishevsky, Tina Kalake, engineered today's show from Studio 2. I'm Avi Wolfman-Arendt.
And I'm Cherry Gregg. Thanks so much for listening.
And tomorrow on Studio 2, calling all Luddites. Are you tired of all the tech in your life? Thinking about going back to the old flip phone? We'll ask, is it possible to reduce your tech dependency?
And don't forget, as I just said, we are live on Friday from 1 to 3 right here on WHYY 90.9 and our YouTube channel with a Studio 2 Super Bowl Extra, All Eagles. We're talking all birds. So coming up next on
Go
WHYY.
Birds, go Birds, go Birds, go Birds, go
we have
Birds.
Here and Now. And I'll be wearing my green. Okay?
Go Birds.